So, something extraordinary just happened. Russia's Vladimir Putin, the man who's built his presidency on never backing down, the pin-up strongman, the man who has led Russia as its saviour and protector for over 25 years, just apologised to another world leader. No, not to Washington, not to Brussels, but to Ilham Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan. Now, on the surface, that may well sound minor, a diplomatic nicety, a way to patch things over. But it's not. Indeed, it symbolises something far greater. In this moment, Putin's public apology reveals just how far not only his, but Russia's influence has fallen, is waning across the post-Soviet world. Because for the first time in decades, it wasn't Moscow dictating terms. It was Baku and Putin, seemingly on the back foot, having to play diplomatic flattery as he conducts a flurry of hosting and engagements around not just the Caucasus, but Central Asia. So in this video, I wanted to break down why such a simple thing as an apology can really matter more than we think. What it says about Russia's waning position, not necessarily just globally, but in areas you never would have questioned, and how, of all, China is quietly filling that void.
This is the Global Gambit.
How are you going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel where we are returning to the Caucasus, because I did a video on this in the summer where we discussed the remarkable peace deal established between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but not from Moscow, not from Turkey, from President Trump. Now, of course, we can discuss the details of that, but the point was, and as I emphasized in the video, it was the growing irrelevancy of Russia in a place that you would never not think it had relevance, role. Effectively Russia's backyard. However, what happened just yesterday, October 9th, also just reaffirmed that, because Putin apologised for something that he had long denied. For context, on December 25th of 2024, a passenger jet operated by Azerbaijan Airlines, Flight 8243, was flying from Baku to Grozny when disaster struck. Somewhere over the Caspian corridor, Russian air defences detected what they believed were Ukrainian drones, and they fired. But instead of intercepting a drone, a Russian Pantsir missile exploded just meters away from the Azerbaijani aircraft, showering it with shrapnel. The aircraft crashed during an emergency landing attempt in Kazakhstan, but only after it was denied entry for safe landing in Russia. 38 people were killed, and for months Moscow denied direct responsibility. Russian media blamed Ukrainian drones, and Putin expressed regret, but never admitted guilt, until yesterday. And that's why I thought this video was important, how a simple apology can symbolise so much more. But what do you think? Before I continue, does this symbolise something more, or am I making a mountain out of a molehill? I personally think in international relations and diplomacy, certain statements, whether they're said or what isn't said, is as important as the actions done. And for Putin to do this, for me, is very important. It shows you he is quite isolated. He is desperate for some countries to be on side. So let's break this down. At a meeting in Danshabi, Tajikistan, on the sidelines of a summit of the Moscow-led Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS, Putin and Aliyev finally met face-to-face. And in a moment few could have imagined, 2-3 years ago, Putin admitted that Russian air defences were responsible. According to Russian state media, Putin told Aliyev, quote, "The two missiles that were fired did not hit the plane directly. They exploded, perhaps self-destructing, about 10 meters away." In other words, missiles didn't miss, did exactly what it was built to do, detonate nearby. And then came the words that shocked analysts who follow this and me who's making a video about it. Putin said he had personally apologised for that tragedy multiple times and promised Russia would pay compensation. So let that sink in. The Kremlin, Russia's stand-up strongman, which still refuses to apologise for anything, from invading Ukraine to the annexation of Crimea or the events in Grozny in the 90s, just offered a restitution to Azerbaijan. So for years, Aliyev has been careful with Russia, pragmatic but never deferential. This time, though, it was different. At the meeting, Aliyev very publicly thanked Putin for his, quote, personal oversight of the investigation. But his tone and the body language made it clear who was in charge. Indeed, very revealing photography of Putin sitting forward-facing, very much engaging Aliyev, who sits sitting back, more that of what we'd expect from a statesman, well, more from Putin. Indeed, he didn't come off as a subordinate of the Russian sphere. He came off as an equal, perhaps even a superior in that moment. Because while Putin offered explanations and apologies, well, some people even caught Aliyev smiling. And well, why wouldn't he be? He's just forced one of the most powerful people in the world, the Russian president, the man who lectures the world about sovereignty, to probably accept fault. In diplomatic terms, that is a humiliation. And it happened not in Brussels or New York, but in Central Asia, a place that has long been Russia's indisputable backyard, its sphere of influence. But this is where the bigger picture is and why it matters. Because at the heart of this, the apology becomes geopolitically explosive. Putin's admission and his economic overtures to Central Asian states more broadly this coming week stem from the same reality. Russia is overextended, economically isolated, and no longer able to project influence the way it once did. Some people estimate that 40% of Russia's oil system industry is at risk or has already been damaged or severely destroyed in some way, shape, or form from Ukraine's continued strikes. So at this same summit in Danshubie, Putin is seemingly urging regional leaders to increase trade specifically with Russia, and has admitted that the combined trade turnover of all Central Asian countries with Moscow is now less than that of Belarus. Think about it. A group of, say, half a dozen states are less than one, which is already seen as quite a big pariah in Europe. It's an astonishing statistic. A region of 75 million people, once tied to Russia by pipeline, military bases, language, culture, so on, now trade less with Moscow than a single small neighbor on its western border, where Russia has pivoted away from ages ago. It shows the depth of the decline. And it's not just about the economics. Russia's war in Ukraine has consumed its resources and credibility faster than any of us could have imagined. It no longer played the role of regional protector. Instead, that balance of power is tilting fast, including from Russia's own economic pivoting to China. Beijing is now building those railways, buying the energy, and hosting the summits, the SEO as an example of that, but also China's direct bilateral links with various members of the STAN nations, the Central Asian Core, let alone the Caucasus. So where Russia once dictated the rules, China offers the money, ensures that stability, and therefore, well, dictates the balance of power. That is what a real transition, power transition, looks like in real time. And so here's where the context gets even more telling. Putin's apology to Aliyev didn't happen in a vacuum. It's part of a broader charm offensive Moscow has suddenly and rather unexpected to a lot of people launched towards its southern neighbours, a region it once ruled without question through fear, not flattery. In recent months, Putin has embarked on occasional diplomatic sprints to keep Central Asian members close, courting leaders from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, promising new trade links, energy deals, and most of all, respect. And so at this same Danshubie summit, he spoke warmly of brotherly nations, urged greater cooperation, and emphasized shared history. Although, is that shared history one that the STAN states will see in the same way that Moscow does, or Putin in his revisionist way does? Not sure. This is the language of persuasion, though, not power. And that shift tells us everything. It's a remarkable reversal for a man who, just a few years ago, berated these same states for, quote, forgetting who liberated them. For when the Kazakhstani government called for the CSTO to be activated in the early parts of February 2022. And then suddenly Russia, well, responds to that, but does bare minimum. And so Tokayev, the leader of Kazakhstan, has anything but, well, warmth and reception for Putin. So now Putin is reduced to asking them to buy more Russian goods, and diplomacy not born from strength, but from utter necessity. But as always, I want to urge caution. Don't mistake this for a full collapse suddenly of Russia or its influence. Moscow still has plenty of levers it can pull. It controls major labour flows. Millions of Central Asian migrants do work in Russia, sending home billions in remittances. It operates military bases like the massive 201st base in Tajikistan, where Defence Minister Andrei Belousov paid a symbolic visit during the same summit. And energy still ties many of these states to the Russian grid. So while Moscow's prestige is collapsing, its presence does certainly remain entrenched. That means we're not watching a clean break, but we are slowly watching a unravel, slow-motion car crash, you could say. Central Asian leaders are no longer afraid of Moscow, though, but they also can't yet be afforded to completely abandon it. So they're hedging, balancing Russia, China, and to a certain extent Europe. There have been delegations of EU states going over to, well, engage opportunities. And so this hedging, or what's called multi-vector policy, is to extract maximum leverage. It is certainly a new multipolar game, be it from the Caucasus to the Central Asian stands. And within all of this, Turkey also has a role to play with the way that it will try to, well, emphasize ethnic and religious ties. Lastly, what's fascinating about this apology is that it gives the rest of the region an effective blueprint. Azerbaijan has just proved that standing firm against Moscow can yield results long enough. If Aliyev can make Putin apologize, why can't Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan demand the same kind of respect? Remember in 2022, Tajikistan's president publicly scolded Putin at a similar summit for saying he wanted to be respected. That was a diplomatic earthquake, and now Aliyev has turned that frustration into actually a physical power play. And as Russia continues to weaken, more leaders are likely to follow. So what we're witnessing isn't just the erosion of Russian influence, it's the reversal, a full-blown reversal of the post-Soviet order, and certainly the complete opposite of what Putin wanted to achieve when he said that the Soviet Union's collapse was the single greatest tragedy of the 20th century. It raises a crucial question. If Russia can no longer act as the regional enforcer, then who fills that void? As I said, China has become the economic overlord of broader Eurasia, the primary buyer, builder, and lender. And what we're seeing is a new version of, you could argue, 19th century great game, a contest not for colonies, but for the corridors, the pipelines, trade routes, digital infrastructures. And Moscow is no longer one of the main players. It's having to counterbalance against not just China, but also perhaps a rather conniving West, if done selectively itself. So in the grand scheme of things, geopolitics, one apology might seem like a footnote. But history is built on moments like these, when the leaders of Russia, once feared across the post-Soviet sphere, has to apologize for the country's actions. You're not just seeing contrition, you're seeing decline, made only worse by Putin's aging and seemingly health decline. And when that apology happens in a region where Russia has been the indisputable dominant entity, surrounded by countries now being courted through charm, promises, rather than threats, you're seeking contours of a real new order across everywhere, even parts of the world we might overlook. And so if you hear something about a technical malfunction or tragic misunderstanding, remember that power doesn't fade overnight. It fades through small humiliations, one apology at a time. But what do you think about this? Am I making too big a deal out of this? Or, as we can see, how one single set of words can seep through into broader trends and shifts in power across nation states? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, then do consider subscribing. And I'll see you all in the next one. And click here for another video about Putin's perpetual decline. Take care.